Claudius Davis.
2 minutes after 9 o'clock here in the Eastern Caribbean, you listen to EFM 99.9. It's now time for us to present to you this evening's program, the Full and Abundant Life radio program, hosted by Dr. Claudius Davis. And tonight he continues the series, The Family and Childhood Development. It's an interactive program. There's an invitation for you to be a part of this evening's program, and to do so, the number to call 457-9997. That's 457-9997. Remember, you can call us direct or place a WhatsApp call or send a WhatsApp text to that number to be a part of this evening's program. So without further ado, we're going to turn you over to Dr. Davis. Dr. Davis, good night and welcome.
And certainly welcome to you too tonight, sir. And it is certainly a privilege to be here tonight again. Of course, here in the United States, it's rather a sad evening with the assassination that has occurred here earlier today. And so I would suspect that much of our news outlets are sort of focusing on that tragedy that has happened here, and maybe start speculating about what this might mean in terms of whether we're going to choose the path of peace or whether this is going to further escalate the random killing of individuals who, because we don't necessarily subscribe to their particular views. And so, I think in a way this sort of connects with what our theme is been about. It is the understanding the development of our character and our personality, and how our family of origin do have a significant impact as to the outcome of our lives. And so I want to begin our discussion talking about, last week we kind of mentioned a little bit about the developmental stages along the life cycle, and to begin to look at some of the both the internal and the external factors that do have an impact and shaping who we are. Many years ago, I think when I first early started out, I started out as a drug counselor and worked in an inpatient setting. And I think it was probably around 1986, 87, somewhere around there. And John Bradshaw, famous writer and author and speaker, had a series, weeks worth, in a Jarvis Center. And our agency at the time, the substance abuse agency, inpatient, we were elected as part of the group that will be a part of that workshop in terms of providing mental health support to the attendees. And during that session, I really enjoyed it in terms of some of the material that was presented that had to do with the family system. And so I want to mention some of that as I go through some of the discussion here tonight. And so I just wanted to give credit to some of the material up front to talk about that. And so I want us to just to review. We were talking about, what happens to adolescents, some of the challenges that they're facing and facing families. And, we talk about ages between ages 10 and 12, and some of the basic challenges there about friendship, highly valued, and they're learning values and such, values such as trust and honesty and fidelity. And we talked a little bit about that. So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. And we talked about the other stage, which is ages 13 to 15. And of course, some of the challenges there, which is romantic experiences, sexual feelings, and the ability to really begin to recognize one's identity and begin to forge relationships with the opposite sex. So That's kind of one of the, we mentioned that last time, so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time. I think we'll look at the ages up to 18. And so, where I want to begin tonight is to look at some of the factors that do have an impact on the development of our children. And, I think one of the areas that we need to pay some attention to is that family stress do have an impact. And that stress, of course, can be, economic situations, social situations within the family system. There might be psychological factors, mental health issues that might be going on. But also, I think there may be spiritual issues that's going on in the family as well. And of course, just the overall environmental issues that family faces, natural calamities, and some of the things that do happen, flooding, earthquakes, hurricane, all of those things can begin to impact the family, that creates this stress within the family. But and you have to understand that children, all of these kinds of stressors disrupt some of the main issues in terms of children's needs. And we'll talk about some of that, in a little later discussion. But also, not only the children are faced with, the internal stressors that they experience within the family system, and that could even be divorce, for example, or dysfunctional marriage, or some of the chaos that happens within family systems. So that's also something that we should put some attention to. And of course, the fact the school itself is where children have to perform academically, and sometimes some of our kids are so stressed out, because of the expectations that are placed on them, both from the parents and within the school system itself, where they have to perform. And some of our children, faced at this level, with brittle or very limited social systems, or ego structure, where their self-esteem happens to be low. This is also an extremely challenging time for our children. And some of our children at this point may also have, severe neurological issues, whether it be autism or Asperger, or ADHD, or compulsive behavior, or just straight up emotional disturbances, where kids begin to cut classes, they begin to get in fights with others, they can't stand still, they're argumentative, and so they face a lot of challenges at this particular level, in terms of what the school itself presents. And sometimes, if you add the fact here that some of these children that are that vulnerable, whether it be neurological, cognitive, or emotional, or behavioral, if they're already struggling in those areas, then uh, you then have to look at what the home life is like, whether that home life is of such way they can begin to meet the challenges, and they have the what is necessary to be able to seek help, to help these youngsters to be able to ride out, or to be able to overcome some of these disabilities. And of course, some of our children may have not just emotional disabilities, or neurological in the sense, but there may be physical disabilities, where a child may be mute, or the child may have hearing problems, or speech problems, or just physical problems. A lot of medical scenarios where they require extensive medical support. I mean, I worked in special ed, and where we had kids who, a nurse had to go to the home, and a school bus, and bring that student, and be able to provide medication during the class period, and actually the nurse had to sit with this child throughout the whole educational day. And when the school ends, the nurse has to get on the bus, takes the child back home, and hand the child off to the parents. So we're talking about some severe challenges that some families, and you have to understand, with families who do have this level of vulnerability and disability within the children, you have to begin to think about the toll that it is taking. For example, in this particular instance that I just shared, where this kid is so physically handicapped, and to where their IQ is practically zero at this particular point. And as they get older, nothing changes. And then you have to think about the family that have to care for this. They have to be there when school is out, and then think about the challenge when school. And I used to think about how difficult it is, and for when school is on break, these parents, that it is their job. And of course, sometimes we do summer school, but even summer school is must end. And so some of these parents can't go on vacation. Their lives are basically attached to this child that is struggling. And of course, in some of our third world countries, they may not have the financial resources like we do here in New York, in the United States, or in New York, I would say, because I think New York is one of the most generous state, I think, in terms of caring for the disabled, the disadvantaged, all of our kids who have some of these serious neurological and medical challenges. And so, but nonetheless, you have to begin to ask, how these families survive and how these kids are able to survive, and what will be the outcome. And some of the tragedy that I have experienced is when these parents begin to get older, and when you have a child who is maybe in their 30s now, and their IQ is basically, zero, and they have to be fed and they have to be kept, and these parents are now getting older. They no longer can lift them because they're too heavy, they're too big for them to handle. And then, these parents have raised some of these kids from birth, and now they get to this place where these kids are now in adults, and now these parents are now in their 70s, and pushing towards the 80s. And now the sad piece of this is to be able now where they themselves can no longer care for these children. Now they have to place these children in some sort of an adult facility, and it is devastating when parents who've raised a child, and now they no longer can care for this child, and then their challenge become where they can care for themselves as well. So I mean, those are just the other extreme end of that, obviously. But I'm just letting you know that there are these families out there who are struggling with kids with severe physical disabilities, neurological disabilities, emotional. And I think mostly we are more aware of the emotional disabilities, where kids are cutting classes and getting in fights and getting suspended and kicked out of school, and they're always involved in some illegal whatever is happening. I think those are the ones that really stand out. But there are a lot of other kids who are so invisible because their disability keeps them invisible, but there's still their parents that are still involved in all of this, situation. And so, and then of course I think the changes that children face themselves, just their bodies are changing, and those are some of the early challenges that they're facing. And so, and that's where I think children do need that stability. They do need that support. They do need that guidance, and of course the discipline that are constructive, that are going to help them to make wise decision in these critical moments in their lives. But let me now move on to really talking about some of the issues in terms of what children in fact need in order to grow and to be healthy within a family system. And what we're looking at here is that kids do need to develop a strong sense of self, and that in many cases, in some families, if the family system itself lacks this self-esteem, the persons who are providing the guidance themselves, that they have a fragile ecosystem, lack of self-esteem, self-confidence, and so on, that certainly is going to have an impact on the child as well. So we have that issue. Then we have your where you have may have a chaotic family system that is sandwiched within a social environment. All of that, in essence, are going to have negative impact. Then poverty will, unemployment, homelessness. There are a lot of children tonight, right here in the United States, that are in shelters, that are homeless. Many families that are homeless, and some of these families do have children, and they are in situations where they're homeless, and you have to ask yourself, how do you help a child that is in this situation where they'll be moving from one homeless shelter to another, and where and in a lot of these shelters, I don't know about St. Vincent, what it's like there. I can tell you what it's like here, because a lot of these shelters are places where there are all kinds of violence, there are all kinds of drugs, there are all kinds of you know beating and stabbing and cutting, and young children are sandwiched within these kind of shelters that we sometimes witness and experience here in the United States. And so what we're saying here is that these youngsters that are being socialized that way, where they no longer have confidence in themselves, there's no sense of importance in who they are, and the only way they learn to survive is to either engage in stealing or fighting or hitting back. And so once they get older and they begin to get independent from their parents and from these structures, and then if they get little power added to that brokenness, then they can escalate all the way to criminal activities, committing murders and killing, and you know just an array of stuff that are happening. And so when you look at a lot of our young people today, that you'll see that, of course, not all young people, because I think there are many young people that go ahead and lead successful lives and productive lives and go to college and stay out of trouble. But many of our children, if you were to look at the research, you will see that many of our young people who are in trouble with the law, who are on our streets, these are the ones you can trace it right back to the family system. And you'll see when the family fails, when the home fails, that there are severe consequences. And those consequences may go all the way into adult. And many of our kids will wind up in either in being incarcerated because of crimes they've committed, or they may even wind up early termination in terms of in the cemetery. And we see this all the time. And so we as counselors and as religious leaders, I think we have to begin to step back and ask ourselves a tough question. When Jesus, or James rather, mentioned, this is what religion would look like, and of course, in this case, he singled out, the homeless and the elderly and so on and so on. But I'm telling you that it's wider than that. We're talking about what some of us may see as the castaways, the wasteful, the those broken children that we see. And so I think when we begin to think about theology and we begin to think about how do we translate the mission of Christ in a practical way in our communities, in our neighborhoods, where we can begin to empower our parents, to empower our children, so that they can begin to become the benefactor of what John, what Jesus was said, it is finished. And he's talking about, the enrichment of humanity, where we can become better fathers and better husbands, and being able to raise children with a sense of pride and a sense of meaning and a sense of hope, and be able to become productive. That's what the gospel, I think. This is why I think this divine intervention was to be able to reverse the process of what has happened, so that we can now become truly human and be energized and be everything that God wants us to be. So there are some tough questions, I think. And I think sometimes we need to sit back and begin to see how we can, interpret and implement, the gospel message in a practical way, so that we can bring meaning to our family and to our home system, so that they can become the benefactor of redemption. And I think this is going to take more than just baptizing people and doing all this stuff. I'm not saying those things are necessary. I'm just saying we're going to have more of a holistic approach. And I think Jesus saw, looked through that lens of seeing all of humanity from all vantage point, and was able to reach out and be able to bring about what needs to be done. And so you have, poverty, unemployment, homelessness. You have also, substance abuse, alcoholism, drug addiction. The program that just ended a while ago was have a whole pep talk, a whole pitch, and how we can now market cannabis, and so that it can become more of a medical solution to a lot of our medical problems and so on. But of course, from where I'm standing, there are a lot of other social negative aspects to all of this as well. And I know that it is easy for people to say, well, that's just PR, that is just people saying things, but that's not really true. Well, I work where I work, my whole life, in most of it, I work in drug rehabs. I still do. I'm a substance abuse counselor here in New York. I work within a system of criminal justice system every day. So I see, what's happening to our young people and so on. So I think sometimes we have to begin to understand that sometimes when people are broken, what they do is they reach out for substitutes. And whether that substitute be alcohol or some other drugs, or marijuana or cigarettes, or food, or gambling or sex, whatever it is, people tend to look outside of themselves in order to find substitutes, in order to remedy for what's going on inside. And so, alcohol is legal, but obviously, think about all the deaths that happen in the United States, as a result of drunk driving. So something that is good can also be used in the wrong way, and certainly have certain severe consequences. But I think a lot of our families, a lot of our home system are struggling because of drug addiction and alcoholism, and that's because of the emptiness that people feel. And when they feel that emptiness, they need something, some substitute. And that substitute may be, like I said, drug, alcohol, or maybe sex, or maybe food, obesity, whatever it is that people tend to get involved in order to make something happen. And so so our children have to live with all of that. And I think just the sheer neglect that we see, the abuse that we see in our family system, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, all of these do have long-term consequences on our young people and our children, and how they're able to define themselves, and how they're able to relate to the world in which they must engage. And that's why I think in many instances we see the suicidal rate is extremely high among our young people. Every day we see the news, we hear of people who have committed suicide because they no longer want to live. That life has become so painful for them that they'd rather exit this life. And this happens a lot. And so we have to begin to understand, and this is not just among adults, but a lot of our young kids are also taking their own lives as a result of the emptiness that they feel. And then out of this also we see a lot of mental illnesses, depression we see with our kids, and an anxiety disorder. I think post-traumatic stress is becoming it's like a badge of honor. It seems like everybody is want to use that title. And so the in the old days we used to restrict post-traumatic stress disorder just to like soldiers and people who have witnessed an event. But I have to say to you that a lot of our children has never been in the battlefield outside, but their battlefield has been at home, and it's been an entire life of abuse and traumatic events, so that they have this ongoing situation. So one of the old tests that we used to do was to kind of try to get the client or the patient to kind of say, well, when did this happen? And we listen and we're looking for an event, like, well, they were driving down the street and they saw someone cut with a machete, or someone was shot, or we look for that specific thing. But now research is beginning to tell us it's not just that, it's a whole life where a child may grow up in an environment that the entire lifespan between being an infant to about age 15, that entire journey was a constant near-death experience. And so it's difficult for them to highlight one event, like a soldier was said, I was in Pakistan, or I was in South Korea, or I was in bad dog, whatever it was, can't even pronounce the word, but I was there, and I witnessed all of this stuff. But a lot of our kids, everything that has happened that has come to cripple them has happened in their home. And it's been a lifetime of a pattern of abuse, a pattern of neglect, a pattern of ugliness. And over time, that has accumulated. And now the internal sense of who they are is so damaged and so broken. And sometimes a lot of these people either attach themselves to gangs, or they may attach themselves to certain religious groups and so on, because of the euphoric of it, or the charismatic aspect of it, and the all of that emotional whatever happens. But what truly happens is nothing changed internally, because the personality is still the same, the character is still the same, because this is just like another. Sometimes religion is nothing more than another drug. I think it was Karl Marx, one of those guys who had said a while back that religion is the opium of the people. It's a way to feel. It's a way to sort of soothe the pain that they feel. And so many others, whether it be a gang, or whether it be just overeating, obesity, whatever it is, or sex, or gambling, or alcoholism, or drugs, or religion, whatever it is, people always looking for a substitute. And I have to say to you, Jesus is not a substitute. And so if you're using the church and religion as a substitute, as you would use a drug, I think you're in the wrong place, because Christianity is about an internal transformation that happens with a person. And so that's where we need to be focusing on. But nonetheless, we have to understand what this is. And so when you put all of this together, when you look at the fact that, lack of self-esteem, within a chaotic family system, the impact of poverty and homelessness and unemployment, all of those things that our children have to bear the burden of all of this. Remember, children don't choose their parents. Okay. They don't say, well, let me line up all the parents out there, and and I'm going to interview all of them, and I'm going to pick the one that I think. Children don't have that choice. And so there are some children who are privileged to be in a family system where you have, as a matter of fact, the gentleman who was just assassinated today, one of his statement that I remember so well, he was talking about the three, things that was so important in terms of building a society and a strong nation. And one of the things he was talking about was a marriage, and people coming together, husband and wife, and living together and honoring that, and for that, people felt that he was too radical, I guess, too ultra conservative. and folks felt like he didn't deserve to live. He should be, taken. But, what I'm saying to us is that there are some fundamental things that if we're going to reverse this whole level of crime and violence, if we're going to be able to create a healthy environment for our children to grow up in, we're going to have to begin to understand that the home is critical. It is the bedrock. It is where children are being shaped. And so we have to begin to allocate some more human resources to the family system. And I think that the local churches should be leading in this aspect of it. I think it is the church's responsibility, I think, in the first place, to be able to shoulder and to be able to guide and to be the front runner. But sometimes I think we lay all of this responsibility at the doorstep of politicians, and we think that we've elected you and therefore we expect you to change our lives. We expect you to do all of these things. But we have to understand that the nuclear family, the religious community, these are the first stop. And if we fail there, then whatever we happens there in terms of our failure gets transmitted over into the larger society, into the larger community. So I think we have to really pay some attention to that. So I want to really talk about, the abandonment. When we abandon our children in terms of their needs, when their needs are not being met, that there are certain consequences. I'm talking about developmental needs now that children must have in order for them to continue to grow and to develop. And I believe that our children, they need people that they can depend on. They need to have that in order for them to grow and to be able to be healthy. We all need that dependency. We need to be able to have people that are going to take care of us, that are going to nurture us and to protect us and to guide us. All those things are critical. So let me just go through slowly some of the things, and they may be redundant, but I still have to say, children are dependent and needy. I mean, infants, someone has to protect them. And someone has to be there. They are starving. They are needy. They need that. And parents have to begin to understand that once you make that decision that you're going to become a parent, that's a priority. And you have to be committed because this child, he or she is needy and they are dependent. They cannot exist without that dependency. They cannot exist if their needs are not being met. And once those needs are not being met, and I want to challenge you. If you look at a lot of our young people that are either incarcerated or on the verge of being incarcerated or really gang related, and you go back and you look at their home life and you'll see what is happening. I think parents need their parents for 15 years. And some of you may have different numbers on that. But I'm saying to you tonight that children need their parents for 15 years. And during those 15 years, they're completely dependent on their guardian. They're completely dependent on their parents. But here's the sad news, though, that many of our children tonight have never had any stable, consistent parent of any kind in their lives to be able to guide them. And some of these children don't even have one parent to guide them. And I work with a lot of kids today. And when I say kids, I mean young adults from ages 18 through about ages 36. I work with that population. I'm telling you, a lot of these people that I work with have never had any parents whatsoever. I mean, not one, I haven't had any parent in this whole upbringing. A lot of our kids, and especially I want the disadvantage of a lot of the young girls, coming from South America, is they come in and someone bring them in, and immediately they bring them in order to use them as prostitute and sexual whatever, and that's all they do. And we're talking from age 14, where they become the tool of someone else, or the possession of someone else, to be sold, and they hit the street and have to perform sexual services to bring money to someone else. And their parents on another country have no clue. And this is not, I'm telling you about real life stories of people that I know, that I see. So you have to begin to understand the level of the crisis that we're facing today, and what's going on with our kids and our homes that are failing. And so I'm saying to us that our children need 15 years. And when I say 15 years, I mean 15 years of mom and dad working creating a loving environment for 15 years and providing them everything that they need. And even after we've done that, we may still have some failures, because we have to, we also, they have to go into the other communities, such as within the educational systems and all of that stuff. That's also now co-parenting with us in terms of what's going on. I think their dependency need can only be satisfied by a caretaker, a loving caretaker, and usually that caretaker happens to be a mom or a dad. And it's like I'm saying, it's best when it's a mom and a dad together, collaborating together for 15 years to help this youngster. Now, I think Kamal did give the number, so if there's any of you who need to make any comments, please feel free to do so. But I'm saying to us tonight that it is important for us to step back as a people and begin, because I hear a lot of discussions about crime and how to reduce it and how to do all of this stuff, and usually when those discussions are, it's always a hint that if you throw more money at it, somehow it's going to be fixed. And I'm saying to you, it is not going to. Money doesn't fix the problem. Money causes problem, but it doesn't fix problem. It is the adults that must make some changes. So I'm saying to us that the children, their dependency need can only be met and be satisfied by a caretaker, by a loving person who's going to be there for, I'm saying, a minimum of 15 years. And if you don't have that, you're going to have problem. I think children need someone to hold them and to touch them. They need that. And because of the society in which we live right now, where, parents have to do 2 and 3 jobs, and in some cases, single parent have to do 3 and 4 jobs. There's no time to hold and to touch. We farm that out to the daycare center. We pay people to do all that stuff for our children. But we as parents ourselves are too engrossed, too busy making the money. And the funny thing is about that business of making money, because here's the thing. I think a lot of people already know that because of their financial situation, that they are inferior. And it doesn't matter how hard they work, because they measure themselves by money, because they're looking at other people who have money. And they know that these people are superior. These people have the power. These people have the status. These people have all the privilege and all the trappings of wealth. And this is what I don't have. So they must be better than I am. And they also communicate that to their children. And sometimes parents will say, I don't want you to be like me. I want you to be better than me. But what the parents are really saying in a very subtle way, I want you to be like that person over there. See, they got a big house, they got all of this stuff. What they're really saying is money is what's important, power is what's important, status is what's important. So even when they're trying to encourage their children, the metaphors that they use, the language that they use is really saying, I am a nobody. But you see, when children come to understand that their parents feel that they are nobody, that they are nobody, so the parent know that they're nobody, and the children know that the parents know that they're nobody. That creates a sense of shame. It creates a sense where children begin to feel inferior. And that deep feeling of when it's planted deep in the psyche of being inferior, I will never be like these people over there. I will never be, because my parents are not, and my parents know that they are not. And I know it. That in itself creates a psyche where children begin to self destruct. And then they begin to find other ways to get there. They begin to take shortcuts, or they may begin to conclude that self education is of no value because my parents have some education, but they are nobody in society. And therefore, why should I even bother to go to school? Why should they even? And the parents say, well, don't be like me. You got to go, you got to go, you got to get it. Well, children sometimes read more into that statement than anything. And so we have to begin to look at the language that we're using, how we're communicating to our children. What is it that we're really saying to them? And we have to be very careful about that. And sometimes I see in some cases where parents are willing to go back to school and get their education. I think that's a much better message when you and your child are working on the same educational goal. Because, I think that's a lot better than when you say better than, when you compare yourself that way. I think it certainly can make a significant difference in terms of that. But also, I think that children need someone who can mirror back to them and to affirm their feelings, their needs, and their drives. I think parents have to have the balance within themselves, the confidence in themselves, that they're not always anxious and sort of tensed and angry and frustrated all the time. Because a frustrated and anxious parents obviously can't, the only thing they can mirror is their frustration and their anger and those negative toxic feelings that they have. But I think to create an environment where you can begin to nurture healthy children, you have to be able to mirror back to the child, what the child is mirroring to you. And you have to be able to smile. You have to be able to spend time with the child in terms of, like I said, touching and handling and being mirrored back to the child, the child's feelings and the child needs and drives, all of that. The parents are going to mirror it back to the child. And those are the early seeds, I would say, of a strong and healthy child in terms of helping that child to develop a healthy sense of self and self-efficacy. So all those things are critical. And let me say, but also I think children need a structure with limits, and they need the predictability. They have to be able, children have to be able to predict, what their parents are going to say, what they're going to do, and not always be anxious and panicky. Is dad coming home drunk tonight? Is mom coming home drunk tonight? Is mom going to be high tonight? Is mom going to be so drugged out tonight that she, children have to be able to understand and be able to have something that is normal, it's predictable. They don't have to be anxious up and down all the time. And many of our children, their life is like a yo-yo. It's like if you want to describe bipolar disorder, they're up, sailing, and next time they're down, up and down. And sometimes a lot of family homes really, it's like if I can use this metaphor, it's like a bipolar kind of environment where you never know what mom is up or mom is down, or dad is up and mom is down. There's nothing calm and soothing and predictable in that family structure. And I have to say to you, a lot of our children are being socialized in that kind of an environment. And that certainly is problematic. And we have to begin to begin to understand that and how it works. So I think that we, neglect. I want to spend a little time talking about neglect, and I certainly want to encourage those of you who are listening. I mean, this is a time that you can send us a text, or you can call us, or you can share your thoughts with us, and let us know what your thoughts are. Let me see if I can monitor what's going on the website. But it seems like everybody is silent tonight. I don't understand why, but they always are silent tonight. But certainly give us a call and let us know what your thoughts are. So, but I think in terms of the need, they need a mutually trusting relationship. They need to know that there is someone that they can count on. And I know that there are many homes tonight is lacking in this. That doesn't exist. And there are many homes though tonight that do have that. There are many homes tonight where children do feel that there is someone there who care about them, and that relationship is trusting. It's there for them. But there are many homes tonight that certainly just doesn't have that kind of environment tonight. So let me. I'm trying to monitor and make sure I'm not overlooking anyone at all. And so children also need to have space to be different. In other words, children need to begin to develop and to find their way also. And what this means is that children need an environment that are going to be safe, where they're going to feel there's a space. And that's where, sometimes children, they have their own rooms, they decorate their rooms the way they like it. And there are different things that really reflects them. Their room reflects them, of course. And of course, parents can also tweak some of that in terms of, maybe this poster is not, what might be, let's talk about that. Let's talk about this poster. Let's talk about what this means for you. But nonetheless, I think children need a space where they can begin to develop their identity, and that might be their room. And that's the only place that they have is their room, but there are many situations, and that's what I was talking about, those kids who do grow up in shelters and move from one shelter to another, where everything they have is in a plastic bag, on the floor somewhere. Everything is in a plastic bag. And in a shelter, you don't have, like, you may be 3 children, but you don't have the 3 rooms. Maybe just one room for 3 children, and everything is in a plastic bag. And then they're moving around, and there's all kinds of stuff happening in the shelter. People cutting each other, people are cussing, people are drunk, police are being called, and there's all kinds of stuff that's happening. And then we expect these children in the morning that they get dressed, they put on a school bus, and we expect them to go to school and perform well when they never had a good night's sleep. When they had to, imagine what that would be like. And sometimes I think we become so self-involved that we can't really extend ourselves to walk in someone else's shoe. And I think that that's really sad when that happens, and I think that's what Jesus talks about. You have to be able to feel, do unto others. And so if you can walk with me tonight and you can begin to imagine a mother who's been abused and now she's in a shelter with everything she owns is in a plastic bag, and she has 3 kids, and she's in an environment that she has no control over. Other people, other tenants in the same shelter are cursing and drinking, and the police are coming, and then she has to get up and get these kids ready and get him, put him in the school bus and goes to school, and the kids never had any sleep that night. And then the teachers have a high expectations. We expect these kids to perform. And then here's another thing that we have quite frequently, because sometimes these kids don't have a shower. So their hygiene is horrible. And so because their hygiene is horrible and they have to go to school because mom is going to get into trouble if they didn't go to school, their classmates begin to back off and begin to criticize and start talking about their hygiene and their clothing. And can you imagine what it's like for a child going through this kind of situation? And you give a child 15 years of that kind of an environment. What do you truly expect of them? Someone says here, I realize a lot of kids I encounter will say that they get gifts and stuff from parents, but never heard the words, I love you. I would add those words to the hugging and touching, etc. Yeah, I mean, that is exactly. And that's why I'm trying to paint these pictures for you, because I work with kids every day. And I know I changed that kids. I work now with, which is very interesting, because I used to work with those kids. And now these kids that I'm working with are not kids, they're adults at this particular time. But I know the story that a lot of these kids never had any of these things. When you are growing up with a mom who is struggling with a bipolar disorder, and then she's self-medicating with crack or cocaine, or now she has to sell herself in order to get the crack and the cocaine, but she has 3 kids and she's in a shelter with these 3 kids. I mean, it becomes, there's nothing about hugging and loving. When mom gets back from the streets, she is out of her mind. And so sometimes a lot of these kids are the ones who become parents. They're the ones who are parenting the mother. And that becomes a problem. And a lot of these kids, they grow up and they become, and that's what they become, they're taking care of people, essentially, because they've lost themselves. And the only way they can find themselves is to become caretakers of everybody else but themselves. And then what happens, they usually get abused along the way. So let's I thank you for your comments. I truly appreciate that, and I have to keep my eyes now on the that link. I didn't know that was possible, but thank you for that. So also, I think kids need security. They need to have enough nutritional food. They need clothing. They need shelter. They need adequate health care. All these are important for this to happen. And when these things are not happened, we're going to have a problem. So you got to have the psychological pieces in place. You're going to have all these other places, but you also need to have some of these basic things as well. Because if these things are not there, it's interesting how Jesus, when he was doing much of his lecture, that he spent, and he was able to turn, 1 loaf into all of this, so everybody had something else to eat. And sometimes we forget that side of Jesus' side of really taking care of some of the psychological and the physical needs before he gets to this other level. Even with the woman who was caught in the act of adultery, the intervention wasn't about, lady, you need to stop your sinning and let me take you to the river and get you baptized. That wasn't his intervention. His intervention was a whole different level. And sometimes in our intervention, we have to do an assessment as to what people's needs are. Where are they? And then we have to begin, rather than, projecting our needs, what we think they need, as opposed to where they are, and to meet them where they are and begin to help them to where they need to be. But security and some of these basic things are essential. I think children need parents' time. And I think that's what the writer is talking about, the hug, because it takes time, quality time, to spend with a child, where you can kind of like be there in their space, where you can laugh with them, you can here with them. You can sit on the floor and draw on the floor with them. And one of the things that was difficult for me, I must admit, working in the elementary school as a counselor, was how do you counsel a 5-year-old? What do you do? Well, you get on the floor and you start drawing and you start doing and playing with the toys, and that's what you do, basically. And so sometimes parents, they come home and they're so tired that they don't have the time to really play with and to sit with and to become a child again, to be able to engage in their fantasy world. Because part of how children operate is they live in a fantasy world. And as parents, you have to be able to go into that fantasy world and be able to play and laugh with them. But sometimes our parents are so stressed out, worried about the gossip at the job place, and am I going to be fired, and all the stuff and the stuff that's happening. And sometimes when people go to the local congregation, it's sometimes even worse. I mean, your job is horrible. You can understand that. But then you go to the local congregation, the church where you're supposed to worship, and the gossip is just as bad. I mean, the attitudes and the behavior is even worse. And so you go home and you want to just pull the sheet over your head, but the children are there. Okay. So how do you leave the job out there, leave all of this stuff out there, and come home now refreshed and be willing to now engage and get into the fantasy world of your child and help that child to sort of bloom and to grow? That is a tremendous challenge. And that's why I said you really need two family. I really do. I think this one family business it's not good, because with two family, at least someone is doing something and they can help each other out and can work. One person could be playing, helping the child with the homework, while the other is doing ironing the uniform for school the next day, or doing something, or whatever it is. That two persons are working together, collaborating, easing the burden and doing things together. And by the way, those families, some of the happier marriages are the ones where the couples are working together and everything. I hear a lot of couples tell me the story. They say, look, when we first got married, we had nothing. We didn't have any furniture in the room at all. And we started getting one piece of furniture, and one couple was saying, we actually, the first thing we got was on layaway. We put a little money, and then we finally got it, and we got this chair, and we got this, and we got that. And now they have a whole lot now. But what they talk about is not what they have now. What they talk about is when they had no furniture, how they worked together as a family and be able to do some things together. And those are the moments, I think, that couples cherish. Those are the things that they remember. And these are where children can begin to engage, that this is where we were able to do things together. We read stories together. We watched shows together. We travels together, went fishing together. We do all of these things together. And these are the memories, I think, that are critical and important for our children to be able to have those kinds of memories. But unfortunately, not all of our children will have that experience, and they are left on their own to struggle. So I think children need direction in the form of problem solving. I'm not talking about yelling to kids. I'm talking about direction where you can help kids to problem solve, to use techniques and strategies in order to be able to resolve conflicts and to resolve problems, and give them the tool that they need to be able to negotiate. Because the world can be bitter, the world can be rough, but if you help your child to begin to develop those problem solving skills, even in school, I was talking to an individual just earlier this week, and I said, look, he said, look, I have a lawyer. And the man is horrible. He always tells me when I go to court, don't say anything. Don't say anything. But he never do what the client wants. And so I said, look, here's what, because, he tried it once on his own. And of course, the judge practically, just, what happens when you do something the judge don't like, bad things happen. Okay. So I said, look, here's what you do. You just raise your hand. You wait until the judge looks at you. Don't say anything. Raise your hand. Wait till the judge looks at you, and the judge is going to ask you what you want. Then you tell him. But you don't just get up and speak, or you don't start look. No, you raise your hand and you wait. And the judge is going to tell you to put your hand down. If he tells you put it down, you put it down, or he will ask you what you want. And then you do that. So we have to begin to teach people, teach our children some of these basic skills. You're in the classroom. You don't understand something. You don't shout out. You raise your hand. And obviously, tell the teacher, recognize your hand and, enjoy your attention and teacher. And if it's a nice teacher, the teacher will do more than just telling you. Teacher will probably walk up and come to your desk and speak to you and ask you what's going on and help you out. Or they get someone else to help you out. But that's what it is. We've got to teach our children some of these basic skills so they can begin to survive and engage the world. So if they're going to survive. But neglect is a big piece. So I want to spend a little time, talking about, it's 10 o'clock. Man, this time I don't know what happens. As soon as we get going, time just disappear. Come on.
Well, I'll just allotting you the extra 5 minutes.
I can't
So
even.
so you actually have one more actually.
That's very, very strange. So next time when we come back, we really have to talk about the effects of neglect. What that looks like in terms of our children, in terms of their personality and their development. So we will definitely come back there and talk about that next time. I really want to thank the writer who sent that message. I appreciate that very, very much, and thank you so much. And also, for those of you who are listening via the radio there in St. Vincent, I truly appreciate that, and God bless. And we'll see you all next week, same time, same place. Thanks, Kamal, for the patience. Bye bye.
No problem, Dr. Davis. Well, you will listen to the Full and Abundant Life radio program with Dr. Claudius Davis as he continues a series with the family and childhood development. Very interesting. And do join him again next Wednesday right here on WeFM for the continuation in the series of the family and childhood development right here on WeFM. So next week, Wednesday at 9 o'clock right here on WeFM for another Full and Abundant Life radio program. Thank you very much, Dr. Davis.
Yes, and
Listen, go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I was saying I forget to. And the phone, there were a lot of comments there. Can I have 1 minute?
Oh, go right there. Go right. No problem. Right there.
Yeah, Samantha says, if we ever wonder how we can make a difference in the lives of children, there are many opportunities such as Guardian and she lists some of the volunteers and so on and so on. Then we have Jennifer who also said, how do you recommend a mother encourage a child to lead by her heart with God's guidance when their father is an agnostic and makes fun of Christianity? That is a very serious challenge. And that's why I said young people you need to do your homework and you need to be very careful because you have to have some things in common. And those are some of the early things you need to begin to look at in terms of doing some of that. But Jennifer, I certainly appreciate that. And thank you so much for your time. Kamal, thanks again for allowing me to do that.
No problem, Dr. Davis. Thanks again. All right, well, so listen down the Grenadines. We're 6 minutes after 10, and it's pretty much time for me to leave you until next week. Well, actually, until Sunday when I'll be in to take care of your Sunday Classics program. Do enjoy the rest of the evening, and like always, remember to be good, be kind. Love you all. My name is Kamal Archibald. Until then, do take care. I'm gone. Good night, Dr. Davis.
Bye bye.